Okay, everyone, so my computer time at least says 9 o'clock, so we will go ahead and jump right into it. Thank you for attending our April Transportation Lean Forum today. Just remember, if you are either a presenter or if you have any questions at the end, to please first mute your microphone for the beginning part of it, and then once that comes, you can go ahead and unmute it. If you have any technological challenges, if you can't hear us, or if you're having trouble maybe typing into the chat or anything like that, go ahead and contact another one of our interns, Quentin Boos. His email address is right there, and he will get you all sorted out. I also just want to acknowledge that our co-producer today is Mary Nordini, and our chat monitor is Campbell Ponton, and I am Tess Ellender, and I will be producing it. So our agenda for today, I just did introductions. We will have Geneva from Minnesota starting us off with some human-centered design and continuous improvement. We will go on to Andrew Wheeler, who is a student from Idaho, talking about an app that he designed. Then we have David from Iowa, talking about organizational performance management. And then finally, we will end off with Minnesota again with Chang from Minnesota's DOT, talking about an improvement with document return workflow. We'll have our open forum at the end, and then we'll go ahead and close it out. So since we have 4 presenters today, I will ask if you guys please hold all your questions until the end so we can make sure we get through all the really good information that we have to present to you guys today, and then we'll leave the open forum for any questions that you have. I also just want to acknowledge that we have TLF members from all over the world, so I'm not too sure if this is your first time presenting, but sometimes we have presenters and participants from different countries, and we just want to say thank you for everyone who comes and listens to all of the information we have to present, and thank you so much to the presenters who are taking the time out of their day to share the information with everyone. All right, and Geneva, if you want to take it away.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Geneva Martin, and I work for the Minnesota Office of Continuous Improvement here in Minnesota as a Senior Continuous Improvement Consultant. And we are housed in the Department of Administration, and I'm going to be talking with all of you this morning about the work that we've done to integrate human-centered design, design thinking, practices and strategies and tools into the process improvement work that we do here in Minnesota. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to advance here.
That's okay, you should just be able to click on the screen. And then, yeah, there you go.
There we go. Oops, I went a little far now. Okay, so just to give you a little background about our office. So we've been around since 2008, and we've actually now experienced 3 administration changes. And our office was founded to bring continuous improvement methodologies from the private sector, from manufacturing, into state governments. And over time, we have morphed in the practices and the strategies and the projects that we lead. And we really try to focus our work in 3 areas, that first being in results. So we manage projects, CI projects through implementation, and we are a free service for other state agencies. And so we lead projects not only at our own department, but at other state agencies as well. And we also coordinate CI awards with the governor's office annually. We focus on culture, we provide leadership CI training to managers and supervisors here at the state, and we also conduct a survey every 2 years that focuses on kind of what is the culture of improvement for all of our state agencies here in Minnesota. And that last piece, we do focus on capacity. We provide free training that is available to any public sector employees. So we get not just state employees, but also county, city, nonprofit staff as well. And so that's just a little context about the office that I work for. And I just want to start just at a very high level, how we talk about CI and the work that we do. And when we talk about CI, we refer it to as the practice is the ongoing effort to improve processes, services, and products. And we know that there's a lot of terminology and strategy and tools that come from a lot of different methodologies that are out there. But again, we're really trying to focus on just that overall improvement. And we like to focus our work in these two different buckets. And that first being customer focused. We want to design and improve services for what our customers want and need. And that's where we really draw on human-centered design to help us achieve that objective. And also we want to make data-driven decisions. So we want to make sure that we're taking both quantitative and qualitative analysis into our improvement work, and we want to make sure that we'll know how to measure our success. And this is a image that we like to use to kind of display just the different methodologies and strategies that we're pulling from. And so we have scientific method, Lean, Six Sigma, human-centered design. These are all things that our staff are trained in. And we're really trying to address that kind of problem-solving cycle of what is the problem, why is it happening, how can we fix it, and were we successful? And so we do pull from human-centered design, integrate that with our other problem-solving work, which is what I'm going to share with all of you, how we do that. So to just give you a little context about what human-centered design is, and walk through this methodology. So human-centered design, that foundation is all about empathy, and it's empathy for your customers, it's empathy for the people who do the work, empathy for the people that are experiencing your services or receiving your products, who have to go through your processes. And so you can't design for someone if you don't understand their experience. So that first mode is that empathy mode. And then once you can understand what the problem is from the customer's perspective, that's when you can start to define what direction you should go in based off of the empathy that you've developed, what's important to them, what's going to make their experience better. And once you can define that problem from your customer's experience, that's when you can transition into ideate, which is your brainstorming mode. And that's where you start to bring different ideas to the table and start to really work through how are we going to enhance this experience, how are we going to design an experience. And for a lot of the projects that we work on at our agencies is we're not necessarily designing new experiences, we're trying to improve experiences for the customers and also for the people who do the work. And so that's where we need to be creative and how do we problem solve around the customer's needs. And then transitioning from ideate into prototype, that's when you take your ideas and turn them into something that's tangible, into something that you can interact with. Whether that's a drawing, whether you're prototyping with pipe cleaners, whether you're starting to build an app. But the idea with prototype is that you're creating something that's into a physical space and not just an idea. And then transitioning into testing is when you're going to bring that product or new service back to your customers so that they can interact with that experience. So that's just a high level kind of explanation of what human-centered design is. And now I'm going to transition into talking about kind of what we've done with the tools that we've learned about human-centered design. Our team started practicing human-centered design after we participated in a design challenge through IDEO, which is a design firm. And we did this training. It took about 6 weeks, and it took us through that entire human-centered design process. And those pictures there are pictures of our team. I know they're a little blurry, but the one with all the Post-its, I'm sure was us brainstorming, coming up with key insights about our customers. And that smaller photo was us actually building some prototypes out of popsicle sticks and pipe cleaners. And we really found this valuable, and we started implementing some of what we had learned in these classes into our projects. And so we wanted to bring human-centered design as part of our training back to our customers, because we've heard a lot of people have asked about human-centered design, design thinking. It's definitely a pretty big buzzword right now, and it's becoming a focus in public service that people are wanting to think about that customer. And so we brought the training to state employees, and though people found it to be very fun, they were having trouble thinking about how to actually apply it to their work, that there was a pretty big disconnect there from creating a prototype to how do I take this challenge and implement it to the customers and the processes that I have. And so though we had good feedback, we took some time, we stopped offering the session that we had, and really tried to think about how can we teach tools that are going to be applicable to participants who attend our trainings. And so we took a little time away from leading that and relaunched our training back in September. And we developed and this is kind of a crazy photo we have going on here, but it's kind of our mind map for our training. But we created a case study that had to do with compliance, and we provided some baseline data, and we do customer research as part of the training, and really try to get people to work through how to develop empathy and how to collect customer research, and then go that step further of how do you synthesize the information that you have about our customers, because we find that we all do surveys, we do focus groups, we have all these ways that we collect information about our customers, but turning it into something that's usable and gathering those insights can be a challenge. And so that's been the focus of our training now that we have in human-centered design. And it's also the focus that we take with our project teams, is that once we have some of this information about our customers, what are we going to do with it? How do we make sense of it? And that's what I'm going to expand on as we continue through here. So how do we incorporate this work into our problem-solving projects and work that we do every day? The first thing we do is we get to know our teams. And this image you're seeing here is a team leap. And this is an activity that we learned through doing our training with IDEO. And we launch every project with getting to know our team. So we talk with our team about what is your working style? What do you want to get out of this project? What are things that I should be conscious about that are happening outside of your life that you're comfortable sharing? Should I never schedule a meeting on Wednesday because you have kids pick up at that time? Things like that, just trying to get more human interaction around CI, humanize that process. And we utilize this tool to help develop ground rules and just to kind of break the ice with our team, because starting a CI project can be intimidating, and it can also be a lot of unknown and very ambiguous, and that can be very stressful for staff. And so we really try to bring that human element, that it's not just about the process, it's about the people. And so this is one strategy that we've used now for every project that we lead. And if you're interested in this Team Leap, we do have it available on our website, and I have that link at the end of my presentation. So just as kind of that review again, so when we're focusing on our projects, when we do customer research, we're thinking about that focus of the customer, design and improve services for what they want and need, and we also want to have the data to back it up. And so how are we going to collect that information? We want to make those decisions based on anecdote, but also on that quantitative, qualitative analysis. And if you'll remember, that first mode that I talked about was empathize and building empathy. You want to build empathy for your customer. And there are 3 different ways that in human-centered design, they talk about how to develop empathy for your customer. You can engage with them. So you can interview your customers. You can have focus groups. You can have a conversation with them. You can ask them questions. That's that engagement piece, listening from them. You can observe them. So observe how they interact with your process, with your service. Sometimes what people say and what people do are very different. And so there's power in trying to get more than just a conversation. But what is another way that you can build empathy for that person? How can you see them interact with your services? And then that third one is immerse. So shadow them through the process. Pretend that you are walking through the door for that first time. And try to experience what they feel. And we've done this in a few different ways. An example I can give is we recently worked on a project with driver vehicle services and title turnaround time, and we followed the life cycle of a title that came through the door from a deputy registrar to driver vehicle services. And we went with one title and saw that whole process, all the people that it interacted with, where it stopped, where it started, where it got moved to. And that allow us to see how the people interacted, how the staff interacted with just that part of the process. And so there's lots of different ways. This is where you can be creative in starting to understand your customer's experience. And so we've stress this with our customers. I recently did a project, we interviewed 33 external customers, and it was a lot of work. And then once you get to that point, what does all this mean? What does all of this information mean? So once you've transitioned from that empathy mode, you've gotten some research, it's trying to think about, again, how do you synthesize that information? How do you start to make sense of all of your customer research? And one of the strategies that we've used with our teams, and we also do in our trainings, is something called an empathy map. So thinking about that customer experience from all the different senses. What is your customer thinking and feeling? What do they communicate to you, how they feel about the process? What do they see? When they walk in the door to your organization, what is the first thing that they see? Do they know where to go? Do they have someone to talk to? What are they observing in that moment? What do they hear? What's being communicated to them? Do they understand what their expectations are? What is so-and-so telling them? And how does that impact their experience? And then also say and do. What do they communicate to you just about the process, about their experience? And it's physically getting yourself to write these things down and thinking about that perspective holistically. And then those bottom two are pain and gain, or I like to do fear and hope. So what is that customer's pain points? What's not working for them? And then what do they hope for? Where would they like to see some improvements? And so this can be a nice strategy, kind of getting you to think beyond just they told me this. Think of them again holistically. What is that whole experience? And I just wanted to show an example. This is something that I facilitated with our commissioners and our agency leadership. We're currently working on an onboarding project, and we had them go through this activity of what do we want a new employee to experience when they walk through the door at the Department of Administration. What do we want them to see? What do we want them to hear? What do we anticipate some of their fears to be? And from this activity, I mean, we brainstormed over 226 ideas. There was a lot to go on, and it was a great way to launch the project. But again, it's taking that time to think about the experience. So I just wanted to show you that. So just to help kind of transition from that empathy mode into synthesizing that customer research, you want to use different tools to help draw out what those key insights are. So empathy mapping is a great tool, brainstorming, and then thinking about how you can pull out key themes from that research. And the strategy that I really like to use and that we teach as well and facilitate is an affinity diagram. So one strategy that you could do is take all of those things that you've brainstormed or everything from an empathy map and try to create those categories. Where do they fall together? What are those key themes that are coming from your research? So again, it's taking that step from we have all this information and now you're trying to make sense of it. You're trying to gather those insights. So to just help kind of wrap up here, a couple more slides, but to kind of show you where we started, again, that customer research, baseline data, doing that engagement, the immersion, building that empathy, observing your customers, and transitioning into synthesizing your customer research. What does this make sense? What are our customers telling us? And identifying what those key themes are from your research. And then the how might we questions allows you to transition from that define mode into ideate and into being able to ideate. So starting to pivot to what are those opportunities for design. And so our themes generally tend to be kind of negative, like there's poor communication or unclear roles and responsibilities. And you start to ask those questions of how do we establish roles and responsibilities that are understandable? And it gives you that new launching pad to take something that's been potentially a barrier, something negative throughout that customer experience, and opens that door into being able to ideate. So just to wrap up the HCD process here, and we do practice ideating, we practice brainstorming, we practice those techniques with our project teams to get them to think about what are all those potential solutions, what are all those ways that we can address this problem, to go beyond just we can't do that or that's too hard. this is our creativity space. This is that space to get innovative. And then transitioning into prototype. And something that's really key with human-centered design is rapid iterations. And a barrier we see with a lot of our staff is that they want to be perfect. They launch something to a customer, it needs to be in its finest form. And it's a really big stretch for people to accept that ambiguity, that unknown, and get them to try something new. And so we try to build rapid iterations. We try to get things tested by staff, by customers when possible, so that if it doesn't work 100% the first time, that we can try again. And we've recently been doing this with the onboarding project, doing rapid iterations with managers and supervisors, getting feedback before we launch to the entire agency. And so we do practice this prototype, rapid iterations. And then finally, that test is when you're getting it in the hands of the customer, and you can again build empathy for your customer in these phases, is that as they interact with your processes and services, are they successful? Do they still have barriers? What more do you need to do to enhance that experience for them? So just to wrap up here, we have a few additional resources on our website. We have our CI toolbox that has a lot of great resources and tools for you to utilize, not just HCD, but other continuous improvement tools. And there's also links to the Stanford D School, which is who we've done design challenge practices for, along with IDEO, who we did our 6-week design challenge with. So if you're interested in that, those are available there. So thank you everyone for your time this morning.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Geneva.
Oh, you're so welcome.
All right, and now we will have Andrew take over.
Hello. So I'm Andrew. I am a high school student at One Stone, and let's get started. 9 people every single day are killed due to distracted driving. Statistically, half the people in this room will get in their cars today and text while they drive. Which half are you? We all know it's reckless and dangerous to do, but we still do it. Why? Because it's a habit, and here's how we're going to break it. Hello, my name is Andrew, and I'm part of the Clutch team. Clutch is a mobile phone app designed to combat distracted driving through user rewards and gamification. I'm a senior from the One Stone High School in Boise, Idaho, and I'm extremely grateful to have the opportunity to be with you today. Now, this may be the first time we've heard of design thinking, or you may have been using it for years, but at One Stone, we embody design thinking in everything we do. If it goes to the next slide. There we go. One Stone is a nonprofit organization that makes students better leaders and the world a better place. One Stone launched their first program, Project Good, in 2008. Project Good allows students to engage in service projects where they can design solutions to community problems. After gaining more popularity, they created Two Birds, a student-led and directed creative studio. Two Birds worked with real-world clients to design logos, videos, and other media content. Then Solution Lab began, is a student-led business incubator for high school students to create and test their business ideas. Most recently, One Stone won thinking. Design thinking is a creative problem-solving method that was developed at Stanford University's D School. Design thinking is effective because the solutions are human-centered and innovative. These qualities result in a more personalized and robust impact in the lives of the target users. Design thinking calls for the application of many critical 21st century skills, which we work to master throughout our high school careers. That's where we came into the picture. Clutch was born out of a semester-long design thinking project we at One Stone called Design Lab. To begin each design lab, including this one, we started with understanding our topic of distracted driving. This is where we researched the impact of distracted driving, who this issue affects, and what has already been done to tackle this issue. Then we moved on to the empathy phase of design thinking. Empathy is critical in design thinking because it allows you to deeply understand the problem from the perspective of the individuals it impacts. Our robust empathy work took a turning point when we interviewed a Boise police officer whose insights directed our project. During the interview, he noted that he pulled over more parents, typically between the ages of 30 to 45, than any other age group for texting while driving. We realized that this was a user population we had not considered before, so we immediately began talking with parents. After speaking and surveying with almost 147 parents in the Boise area, we defined the problem in a how might we statement. A how might we statement is essentially our guiding question for our project. It's specific and includes our end user, but not the solution. For our project, our how might we statement was, how might we encourage parents to not text while driving? With this guiding statement in mind, we moved on to ideation. During our ideation phase, we created as many solutions as possible. To do this by employing a method we called 50-1ing. The philosophy behind this activity is that the initial 50 ideas you have during this process are not going to be original. And then the 51st idea you have will be the one that is truly unique and game-changing. There are many ways to ideate during the designing of a solution, some of these being in the logo and iterations you can see on the screen. Another idea that we had early on was to create a box on the outside of the car, physically stopping anyone from reaching their phone. Needless to say, this was not quite feasible, so we kept ideating. Finally, we came to the idea of a mobile app that we named Clutch. Clutch is a mobile app designed to combat distracted driving through user rewards and gamification. Following ideation is prototyping and testing. We need to see what this app would look like and do. Let's test it with our focus group of our end users. To prototype, we created paper wireframes of our app to effectively design the look and functionality of the app. Wireframes are like visual models of how the app will look, similar to blueprinting and storyboarding. This is visualizing what it can look like. We tested the product with our focus group 2 to 3 times, considering feedback and iterating upon our original design. One element that the user focus group latched onto was the competition aspect with comparing points, as well as gating rewards locally for not using your phone. Many wireframes later, we came to Clutch's working prototype. This is where our idea from Design Lab turned into a real-life business. The final 2 steps of the design thinking process are implement and reflect. That's what we're doing today. Now Clutch is a mobile phone app designed to combat distracted driving through user rewards and gamification. The development of Clutch continues as we code, network, and develop Clutch's business, but we haven't lost sight of what we learned during the design thinking process. We continue to empathize with our end user and reflect on our process to make our product even better. Here's a demo of what Clutch might look like. I have no idea if everyone will hear it. If not, I can send the video later.
Are you ready to enhance your drive to just drive? Open up your phone and access the Clutch app. Log in with your existing username and password or set up a new Clutch account. This brings you to a welcome screen. Tap to access your home screen. Here you will find your Clutch stats so you can see how you stack up next to your friends, your weekly goal, and your potential award. At the end of a set period of time, you can view a menu of options and choose the reward you want. These rewards are businesses like Proof Eyewear, Meraki, and The Still. By tapping on one of these, you can see the discounts they offer and cash in your reward if you win. Invest in Clutch to join us in protecting our roads and our loved ones.
So some of the businesses that were just displayed on that video are local businesses in Boise, Idaho. Those are just given examples since we haven't had defined partnership with like very local or regional wide companies. Soon I and the rest of the Clutch team hope to launch our app and enhance the world's drive to just drive. Now, here are some design thinking mindsets that we used. The first mindset is iterate, iterate. This mindset is critical in human-centered design because it makes feedback from the people we're designing for a critical part of how a solution evolves. We iterate because it allows us to keep learning and eventually reach an effective solution. A second mindset is embrace ambiguity. This mindset is tough because we aren't comfortable not knowing the answer to our problems. However, embracing ambiguity allows us to open up creatively, pursue new ideas, and arrive at unexpected solutions. Third, we have practicing empathy. This is where we step into the shoes of others and solve problems from their perspectives. The fourth mindset is failing forward. Failing forward is not only being afraid to fail, but falling fast and taking what you've learned from your failures and making your next solution even better. Our final design thinking mindset is bring optimism. Optimism is the embrace of possibility. The idea that even if we don't know the answer, it's still out there and we can find it. Using these mindsets, I'm going to be walking through a couple activities that we use. The first mindset is called yes and. It's a fantastic game to get us moving and get our creative minds thinking. So to do this activity, you would want to get everyone to stand up. It's just get your body moving, your blood flowing, so you get all those creative processes. It's an ideation game we use to create a synergistic culture and mindset. Here's how you play. You all stand up. You all get into a small circle of groups of like 5 to 10 and try to design a birthday party, let's say. First, we'll try yeah, but to show the mindset change. Let us demonstrate. So for yeah, but, it's similar to yes and, except let's say that if I want to make a birthday party and I say, yes, I like balloons. And the next person says, yeah, but you're kind of just shutting down that idea, and that's what we're trying to stop with yes and. So with yes and, it's all about building off all these ideas and accepting all ideas for what they are, an idea. Nothing's going to be perfect. It's a great game to bring back to your teams to improve group cohesion and foster a mindset of synergy, rather than a mindset of making your own idea king. So for there's no time to ponder about what is a good idea and not. So write fast and write often. One idea per sticky note. Yell at your idea. This is the yes and aspect of the method. We have to hear each other's ideas to build off of them. The question that we ideated for was, what are transportation problems in your community? So this is very similar to yes and, except instead of saying yes and, you'll write your idea on a sticky note and slam it on the table and say what is on a sticky note. So I'll say some transportation methods that I use, like bus, slam it down. People might be thinking public transportation. They may be thinking carpooling. They may be thinking bikes that I haven't thought of yet. So the idea is just to get out as many ideas as possible and know that there's never going to be a bad idea. And that's it. Help Clutch enhance the world's drive to just drive. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. So we will still have the open forum session at the end, but I do want to just open it up right now for any questions, since Geneva gave a really good introduction to design thinking, and then Andrew gave a fantastic, tangible example of how he used it to create something himself. And the fact that you guys are high schoolers is just absolutely incredible. So if anyone has any pressing questions they would like to ask, please unmute yourself and ask them. Otherwise, we will get Campbell to read some off of the chat pane once we get to that open forum. So if you have any questions, please go right ahead.
This one's for Andrew. Andrew, can you hear me?
Yeah, hey, Gary.
Hey, great presentation again. Andrew, again, congratulations to you and your colleagues. I understand that this was also presented at the South by Southwest conference. What's your top learning there from the South to Southwest conference about presenting about design thinking there?
Yeah, so for South by Southwest, we didn't exactly present about design thinking. We mainly went there to go to the pitch competition that we accepted for. Sadly, we did not win. A team called Trio won, which had a belt for the blind, would help people not drift into traffic, which I was really excited about. It was a great idea. But we went to South by Southwest to help coach other One Stone students. Bennett Hune is one who had his own panel for about 30 minutes at South by Southwest. We helped with them. And as well as One Stone had their own design thinking panel that we would have loved to help, but their design thinking panel was at the same time our pitch was. but one stone was there. We had around 50 people at the design thinking panel, but we were not sadly able to present on design thinking specifically.
All right, thanks, Andrew.
Does anyone else have a question?
Well, if nobody else does, this is Gary again, and this one's for Geneva. Geneva, again, terrific stuff on design thinking there in Minnesota state government. Do you, and it sounds like you have classes, which is terrific, would you entertain the idea of having folks from other, let's say, other government agencies, let's just say, for the sake of argument, from Colorado, come and audit one of your classes?
Geneva, I'm not sure if you're trying to talk, but you're still muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. So if what I can say to that is that on our website in that CI toolbox, which I see that the links were dropped into the group chat, we have resources about all of our trainings. So we currently offer 4 trainings: an intro to CI, a problem solving, process improvement measurement, and then our human-centered design and CI. And so we have workbooks for all of those trainings, which help guide the curriculum. And we also have more formalized written curriculum that we don't post on our website, but we have shared with other people who are interested in taking what we've developed and training it themselves. And so that is an option. We are a team of 3. We're pretty small, so our training capacity is pretty limited right now to our state agencies, though.
And I do appreciate that. And thank you very kindly for sharing all that stuff. That's a wonderful thing about communities of practice, and we plan to open that up and learn from you. Thanks, Geneva.
Yes, thank you for the question.
Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask before the open forum at the end? All right, well, we will keep on moving then. Next, we have David from Iowa DOT, and he'll be presenting on organizational performance management. So David, if you want to go ahead and take it over.
Well, good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Was that a yes or a no?
Yes.
Good job. I'm glad. I'm now trying to get it to move forward for me, but I'm not winning.
You should just be able to click on the screen first,
Okay.
and then click
Great.
again, and it should move forward.
So make it happen. My name's Dave Putz. I work with at the Iowa Department of Transportation. I've been there for about 22 years. I work in the Strategic Performance Division, a section called Organizational Improvement, pretty much a one deep so far. I was originally hired as an analyst for process improvement teams, but my work to date has been much more on required reporting and enterprise level improvement work. And I'm clicking, there we go. Oops, I went too far. A little bit about Iowa, not Idaho, or Ohio. We're in the middle of the country. Interstates 80 and 35 intersect in the middle of our state, primarily known for corn and soybeans, but Iowa generates, well, they say up to 40% of our energy by solar is by 2020, and we've become an insurance center for the country. And of course, we're very proud of our state fair. We tend to have over 1 million visitors at the state fair. Our system is pretty expansive, very much farm to market. Many bridges, most of which are not owned by the state, so we get a lot of grief about that. A lot of travel being in the center of the state. You can see billions of miles there, as well as billions of tons of freight. With all the bad weather, I thought I'd throw in this little factoid. If our operators are out on running all of our snow routes that travel nearly as far as the distance around the Earth on every single storm. So, topic today is organizational performance management. Well, no offense, but don't we have that already? Right? Transportation performance management, asset management, project management, change management. In fact, if you ask, if I actually talk to someone about this, they'll say, well, isn't that just like? And what we've learned early on is that the notion of organizational performance management is going to be confusing unless we can provide some sort of clear, concise message on what it is and why we're doing it. So we actually have been discussing this under the radar within the department for several years. We've come up with a working definition that reads, using information to understand and improve your work. Not very specific, but the intent really is to help anyone, wherever they are in the organization, whether they be the CEO or a process owner, to be able to have the information they need to understand how well their work is going and the ability to actually impact and to improve their performance. Now, that's a very tall order. There are a lot of people, a lot of jobs, a lot of structures, a lot of levels, but how do we, the key question here really is, how do we actually frame that and help people see both their performance and the department's performance, and probably more importantly, how they actually fit into that. And it's actually a question we've been wrestling with for quite a while, but I think we're making good progress here. Our approach will probably be not unlike what process improvement folks have been doing for years. We're going to try to implement a model. Now, models are not perfect. My office mate loves sharing this quote from George Box: all models are wrong, but some are useful. If you talk about models, I wouldn't suggest leading with this idea, but the notion is that you build a model, but it's not perfect. However, if you build a good model and you can understand the performance of the model through metrics and analytics, you should be able to gain some insight into how the organization functions. That's the intent, right? So there's also this notion that if the model is good and it matches your organization's performance well, the model should change. It will not be a static thing. If it's a good match to your organization and your organization is changing, your model should change as well. Real quick, process level model use is fairly well established. I'm presuming process and lean folks are familiar with SIPOC. Years and years and years ago, I would bet most of us probably heard about input, process, and output, but attacking the supplier at the beginning and the customer at the end, I think, is a really good way of expanding that conversation and making people think outside of just the normal work. This is kind of might be a mid-level model. Most of you are probably familiar with what I know as the Swimlane model. You can get very detailed in some of these to better understand the work. And it's not limited to process. There are program models that are out there. This one's a fairly well-established one. If you work from right to left, you're building the program. You identify a need, you identify some outcomes, and you work your way backwards to build it, and then you implement it from left to right. And if you notice, that model has an aspect of evaluation to it. So model use is actually not uncommon in government, but there are multiple models for multiple uses. The trick here for us really is, how do we model a department with all the moving pieces we have? That's kind of difficult. And we also have the notion that people who hear modeling and improvement very much think at the process level. It's totally expected, right? But the goal really is how do we model it? And you start, I think, with trying to understand what kind of performance you're interested in knowing about and learning about. Well, this is actually something, it's a graphic out of a book by the Project Management Institute. It was put out about 5-6 years ago. being introduced to the notion of project management. And I liked the diagram because it laid out what I thought was a high level framework of the work of an organization. You get the vision and the mission and the strategy and objectives at the top, but then it breaks down into setting guidance for both operational side and then project and improvement oriented work. And it works out. I've presented this a couple times. People are still nodding their heads at this point because there's still high level concepts, and we're still using terminology that most folks know. But it gets to be a little interesting because when we go from the concept of the focus of the work, i.e. at the top, setting the goals and objectives, operationally working on performance, and then strategically working on change, now we get into whose role is it, whose job is it, whose responsibility is it. And that clarity is actually important for a couple reasons. One, so the work is done, and two, giving primary responsibility to a group allows you to identify secondary and tertiary responsibilities. In other words, people don't feel like they have to have their finger in everything. They get to learn what their part of the pie is, and they get, hopefully, learn the skill set to do it really, really well. So the levels were important in this model, the breakdown for functional units. Some of you may actually have project management offices in your organization. Chances are they're working on initiatives, either new or change oriented. Now in Iowa, it may be true in other states, we actually have an Accountable Government Act. We're prescribed to have a performance plan and a strategic plan. We have no options, and they're both cyclical in their nature. Now, it should look, well, having set it up this way, the left side is performance and the right side is change. I'm going to guess that if those of you who are hardcore improvement aficionados are probably seeing a plan, do, check, act, both for performance management and change management. That's intentional. The intent is to, on an ongoing basis, be able to identify, monitor, and provide feedback on both how an organization is performing as well as keeping track and the impact of the initiatives that are underway. Now, it being cyclical, it does feed into the very top of the organization. And the balloons up at the top there, the performance, are really the results of the left column of work. The initiative on the right is the feedback of the right column of work. And then, of course, when you do any sort of organizational planning, you definitely have to pay attention to outside issues. And this is typically what this would be a standard strategic planning process, right? The difference in this particular model is that instead of just creating a strategic plan for change, setting goals for change, you also set direction for performance. This is actually done at the process level and the individual level. For example, if you evaluate an individual, you're going to give them feedback on their performance, but you'll also identify things to work on. One is not done at the expense of the other. They're both done in the hopes of helping the employee understand how well they're doing and the things that they can work on. Same concept should actually apply for organizations. At least that's what our current level of thinking is. Okay, so this notion of, as a state agency, we're required to track performance and change initiatives, and there are a bunch of moving pieces, and we talked about modeling them. But part of that model is actually getting the pieces to fit together so they're actually working in support of each other, not against each other. And one of the study groups we had working on this actually came up with the short answer is we need to work on alignment. But alignment is actually at least two-dimensional in nature. First is probably the more common, that is organizing work to accomplish an outcome. Our team called that horizontal alignment, where an outcome or a goal usually set by a customer is identified, and then the team works to understand the performance and meet the outcome identified by that customer. Key here is that if the team is allowed to focus on the outcome, but given freedom to figure out how to deliver that, we think that that's a really good way of not micromanaging. It's a kind of one of those important aspects, especially if you're working in particular in empowering employees, engagement, relevance, value, and the like. That's a key aspect for us. So the horizontal alignment is really about process and program level work and focusing on improvement. But at current rate, we don't have an identified process like lean, CQI, TQM, but the intent would be to find the resources to support them to do that. The second aspect of this, if you can turn that thinking kind of 90 degrees, is how to align the work at the various levels of the department to actually support each other. And the team, not overly creatively, but they call that vertical alignment. The important part here is that even if every single process and program has an outcome, there's still work to be done to make sure that they're all supportive of one another toward accomplishing the larger outcomes, or at least not working, actively working against. There are going to be agency requirements by code and other things, but they should not be working against each other. And in today's world of diminishing resources, I don't think organizations really have the advantage of working in an unaligned or uncoordinated fashion. Focusing on what's important is really, really critical. Okay, so two types of alignment, but how do we connect them? In other words, how does someone at the top make sure that we're really performing well? Well, I think here the notion is to focus on outcomes, because the outcomes are what are produced, or product is what's produced, but you do it ultimately for an outcome. But it's a way of connecting both the vertical and the horizontal. Again, this notion of focusing on outcome and not necessarily the work is a way of empowering your workforce, and it gives each portion of the organization a focus. Actually, this is, some of you may be familiar with the idea of right way versus the right thing, or Drucker probably talked about efficiency and effectiveness. This dichotomy is not new, it's just how we're framing it. But hooking the pieces together allows for that sense of relevance and purpose that a lot of the current literature and workforce development anyway is making, really highlighting the importance of. So areas of management the right way, areas of leadership the right thing. We think that's really the areas we ought to have our folks focusing on. So why do we pull on outcomes instead of other things? Again, we think mission-related outcomes are a way of aligning things. It gives folks the thing to shoot for. We do like the notion of providing a focus on what, and leaving the how to the professionals. Otherwise, I think you're going to really hurt your employee development efforts. And actually, at its root, getting better at horizontal alignment, i.e., given an outcome, doing your best to hit it, is actually one of the ways of making an organizational more agile. Because if the outcomes change, if leadership changes the outcomes for a unit, but the unit is used to adjusting to meet an outcome, you'll be able to react more quickly. And again, the notion here is outcomes instead of, say, measures. We don't align to measures because they constantly change. And if we didn't, we passed on the notion of aligning on structure, because perpetuating the structure is not what's important. It's in making sure we're successful in accomplishing outcomes. So we're going to try to let the form follow the function instead of vice versa. So a lot of this is theoretical so far. We've gotten so far as to our director is been sharing his desire to have the Department of Transportation be focused on mobility, and we're going to start tracking outcomes related to safety, flow, sustainability, and accessibility. We've been working on this proof of concept probably let's say over a couple years. Two separate teams, one was conceptual, and now we're working through a little more of the content. This slide will show to be determined for a couple of them. It's an older slide. We've actually developed at least areas of interest for measurement for sustainability and accessibility. And those of you who did public dashboards 10 or 15 years ago, this may look really familiar. I think it's the same kind of work that needs to be done. But the key here is, can we actually then use outcomes to cascade performance in the organization? And that's actually not a new idea in transportation. There are a couple of visuals here, too small to read, I understand, but the lower left is one on Tismo. And the one in the upper right was actually a value tree done by North Carolina DOT a handful of years ago as they worked on developing a set of metrics. we're going to, I don't know whether our development teams will do this or a consultant will help us do this, but the concept of cascading outcomes is something that most people understand, but when you get into it, it's very hard to do. We're looking to hopefully to find a nice clean process to help people through this. But our next step after the high-level outcomes are identified is to go to the major units and talk to them about their work. What do you do? Why do you do it? Who do you do it for? What's the definition of success? And then identify those outcomes and capture them, and then talk to them about, okay, so where does that connect? How is that work contributing to the outcomes at the higher level? We actually think that this can be kind of a isolated, compartmentalized effort. If I know one piece and how it connects, then I can go to the next piece and how it connects. We're actually hoping soon to go out with an RFP for a firm that will help us develop a process. Now we own up to the fact that some units may have outcomes that don't connect. In this case, this was actually taken out of a worksheet presented as a concept. There's a yellow box there that says, look, there may not be a connection for a unit to an outcome, and that's okay. It could be our framework's not perfect. It could be that we haven't explored it as fully as we want to, or it could be that they're doing some sort of other legislative or mandated piece of work. It doesn't mean a good or a bad thing, but being aware of what the outcomes are and where they fit, that's really the critical aspect of all of this. Now, all that so far has been taught on the performance management side. We're not nearly as developed on the change management side. Change would be what most folks would call strategic planning side of the table, much less developed, though we do have an office of project delivery, project management in our project delivery bureau and one in our IT division. We're actually giving serious thought to expanding it into a notion of organizational portfolio management. In other words, of all the projects we have, whether they be construction projects or IT projects or improvement projects, how do we maintain a good set of eyes on where they are, what they're impacting, and evaluating their progress? Sometimes things change, and if you're stuck in a project for too long and not making the benefit, you may need to readjust. So we actually need to develop a framework for this. And actually, I was out in Colorado and went through an ADCAR seminar. We've recently worked on implementing an employee engagement program. It is obvious that if you do not consider the employee and the work environment in anything related to improvement or measurement or management, you're going to be swimming upstream. So our quick lesson so far is you've got to consider the employee and the work environment as factors as you go about developing any sort of approach to do this kind of work. So I'll wrap up here. Our real goal here is to take what we know from process and program measurement, management, and improvement and turn it 90 degrees. We need to better understand and see the department's health and overall performance, but we need to pay attention to not only the fancy, flashy things that we're doing for change, but we need to be able to direct performance as well. So our hope is to be able to bring on a consultant that would help us not with a tool or a fancy gadget, but help us develop a process that will help us improve both horizontal alignment, that is understanding and improving performance of our processes, but also in aligning and cascading outcomes so we can better understand and improve the performance of our department as a whole. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I'll look forward to any questions you might have at the end. Thanks.
Thank you so much, David. That was some great information. I do just want to pause for a second to see if anyone has questions for David before Chang closes us out with an innovation from MnDOT. So if anyone has a question, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask. Okay, Ching, if you want to go ahead and close us out.
Okay, thank you. I hope everyone can hear me. My computer actually restarted in the middle of a presentation, but I was able to get back on. So my name is Chang Yang. I'm a management analyst at the Minnesota Department of Transportation. And this is just a real high-level overview of our document return workflow or innovation that was just developed this year. I can't make it go to the next page for some reason.
Have you clicked on request remote control?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. There you go. You should be able to click on the screen and then control
Okay.
it.
Okay. Let's skip the slide. So just a, one short simple fact about the Minnesota DOT is, Minnesota DOT has 5,000 employees, and we're responsible for 30,585 miles of state highways and interstates in Minnesota. So next, well, this workflow came about when we were working with FHWA and just trying to get documents back and forth. So some of the pain points that were being encountered was probably the number one most important part is it was taking a long time to get the documents to FHWA and back. So obviously the first point there is snail mail, and either we were just talking about, either you mailed it and you waited a couple days and they would mail it, or we would actually physically get in a car and drive over to their office to drop off the document. This just moves it to a totally electronic process that is a lot faster. Some of the other pain points that we were trying to resolve were multiple emails, email size, attachment limitations, multiple versions of the documents floating around in different inboxes, reluctance of the recipient and the employees to use the electronic storage system. Some of the other things were the documents weren't being tracked, or that people didn't know where the documents were or how long the document was taking to be fully executed, as we say. And also there were inconsistent processes where you didn't know where the document was going next, or who to return it to once you finish signing the documents. So, in discussion with FHWA, we actually turned this into a bigger workflow. That's why it's called document return. FHWA is just our pilot partner for this, but we turned it into a workflow that would benefit MnDOT as a whole. We made it usable for everyone that actually has an email access. They are able to use this process to get a document back to a person in Minnesota DOT. So there's going to be a demo reel, but what it really does is it basically sends you a link to a document, and then it provides a second link that allows you to return a document. And basically what happens is it provides a unique link. I know the slide says private, but I thought I changed it over, but it didn't make it through. And the link is just a read-only version of the document. And it always provides the most recent version of that document, which is stored in our electronic management system. It also overcomes email limits, because it increases it to a 100 megabyte limit. And you are always returning it to a MnDOT person. One of the reasons I put that it is an intuitive process, because when we were piloting it with FHWA, there were communication issues over Skype, and we weren't able to email him the instructions, but the person at FHWA was actually able to figure out, once he got the email, to return it back to us without any instructions at all. The other thing that we really want to enforce is that the recipient's signature process does not change through this process. We are not asking them to sign in a particular way. We are just asking that they return a document to us using this process, and that this actually does create a record for document tracking and routing purposes. And now, just a sample with FHWA, this is just a sample of the email they receive. In the email, there's basically gives you the title of the document, it gives you a link to the document, and then a second link to a web page that allows you to upload the document and return it to us. Now it also can be anyone with access to email. And then I'm just gonna go to the next page. So this, once you click on the second link, a web page basically comes up, and on the left-hand side is basically what the recipient would see or what they need to fill in. So basically, we try to make it as simple as possible. The first one is just a paperclip. You would click on that, you would get a standard file browse to your document to upload it. And then what happens, and I didn't explain this, but in the email, there is what we call an eDocs number, or a unique number that's provided to you. You do need to enter it in for this part, for it to be able to know which document you are returning. Then you would also, the next step is basically you would enter the email address of the person you're trying to return it to, and then you would enter your contact information, your email address, and your name. That's all you have to do. You hit OK. Then what happens is an email is received by the employee that you are returning it to. Basically, the screen has all the information that you typed in. They must click the attachment to view the document. And there's two options for them. They can either accept the document, which is that save as version in eDocs, or they can deny from eDocs. And basically what happens when you deny it from eDocs is a pop-up comes up, and you basically have to write a reason why you're returning it. And it would just go back to the recipient, and they can just refer back to the original email to correct the process or correct what they did, or if a review needs to be done, and they would just click the second link and start the process over again. So what happens when they hit save to eDocs is a new version of the document is created in eDocs, and an email is sent back to the recipient that their document has been accepted. The document also loses its public access, so that the public can no longer, by the public, I mean the recipient, can no longer view the document, but they should have saved a local copy to upload it, so they have their version. So basically it's saying, you have your version and MnDOT accepted your version. We're just putting it in electronic storage. So that's basically a really quick overview of the document return workflow. I want to thank everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Chang. Does anyone have any questions for him before we just go ahead and start our open forum?
Chang, hi, it's Gary Van Such again. Thanks for presenting that. So I'm just curious, for you personally, what is the next improvement, the next challenge that you're taking on?
Well, we've always talked about doing workflow processes in phases. So right now, you can see that the recipient has to enter a lot of information in manually. Our phase 2, what we're looking to is just providing that information right away in the workflow. Once you click on it, the document number or that unique number is already provided. Instead of having to enter the email address of the person you're returning to, it'll be either a drop-down box or a list of people that you can return it to. So you just have to find that person. And those were what we were talking about for our next improvements to the workflow. It's just making it as easy as possible for the recipients.
Great, thank you.
Chang, it looks like you're still controlling my screen, so I'm just going to go back to this open forum, and we're just going to go ahead and stay on this page while people ask questions. And feel free to unmute yourself to ask any questions.
Hi there, can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I didn't realize I was unmuted. I was trying to, my screen froze. Anyway,
No,
so I have a
okay.
I was wondering, how did you determine that this was the best method to solving this problem that you identified of returning documents from the public?
Well, we didn't actually, well, I can't say that MnDOT identified the problem because we identified it working with FHWA. And this actually is a problem that came up, I would say at least 3 years ago when they started this process, and then we were just talking to them, and they were talking about what they currently do. What is their current process to return a document to MnDOT, because their documents they return are very large in size. So obviously there was already the email limitation. But what would happen was there would have to be an FTP server that's set up. And then what would happen is MnDOT would put a document in there, then they would have to email FHWA, and then FHWA would get the email, then they would have to go into the FTP server, do their thing, and then they would have to put the document back in the FTP. So it just went back and forth like that a lot because a lot of their documents are under review. It's not just like sign this document, get it back to me. So that was a lot of the pain points that they were running into, was that it just took a lot of time. Nobody knew where the documents were. There was no tracking process. You were basically just waiting for an email to come up. So in discussions with that, there were several solutions that were talked about in the meantime. And the solutions were, what if we gave you access to our network, but then, you run into the security issue of people outside your employment having access to your system. So there were talks about that, and it went back and forth. But then we got our hand on this project, and we were talking, well, what if we just developed a way for the recipients to return a document to us without having access to our systems at all? It's still all done outside, but the document is just stored on our server as long as it was okay with our IT department and with our legal department, that the document was stored here in our server once they uploaded it, as long as it was virus scanned, as long as it fit our requirements. Was it okay? And they said, go ahead. So we worked with them, it was all okay, and this is the process that we arrived at. That was the best solution. So right now we're doing with FHWA, but there are several other offices, our construction office, our transit office. They've been asking if they can use this workflow too, to get documents out to their recipients or their vendors, as they call them, and to get their documents back.
Oh, thank you for that.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions from the chat. This first one is for Geneva from Alex Sheehan. Are there any specific human-centered design strategy examples that you found to be helpful, and what was the product these examples were applied to?
Sure, that's a nice, good question. I would say that something that we've just have really focused on is building that empathy component in our problem-solving work, specifically pushing our project teams to use that same mindset as well. And so sometimes it's not necessarily using a tool, it's just how do we consistently bring up the customer, that person, that human component into the problem-solving process. And so I think a good example can be even like with process mapping. And you're mapping the process, and there might be a delay indicated by a customer. And it's taking that moment to say, well, why is the customer causing a delay? Or what are they experiencing that would cause them not to get something back to us? And so it's constantly trying to reframe situations to bring in that customer element. I would also say that we're more intentional in our projects to not just do surveys, but find other ways that we can interact with or observe or immerse ourselves into the customer experience. I gave that example of interviewing 33 people and doing a survey on top of that. And so just trying to incorporate that kind of in parallel with the other problem-solving work that we're doing throughout the process.
Great, thank you. We have another chat question for you, Geneva. This is from Nigel. Kind of related. To what types of projects have you applied human-centered design, and specifically, have these projects been mainly internal processes with fellow employees as customers, or highway projects with the traveling public as customers?
Well, I would like to say all of our projects that we incorporate the human-centered design method to it. I can give a couple of examples, one that plays to more internal and one external. Internal, I think a good example is the onboarding project, those pictures that I showed of the empathy map. And we were very intentional to frame that entire project of what is the experience for a new employee coming to the Minnesota Department of Administration. And we took time, we mapped the process. We also did what's called a journey map, which is another way to display the human experience and interaction within a process or a service. And so that became a really helpful visual when talking with the team and also with our senior leadership and our agency leadership to talk about how is the customer really a new employee that we want to retain here at our agency, getting communication from our agency prior to hire. What does that first day look like? What do we want that first day to look like? And throughout that process, we conducted focus groups, both with new employees here at the agency, along with managers and supervisors, to try to get a more holistic understanding of what does that experience look like, not just for the new employee, but for the manager, supervisor as well, because they're going to be the ones that we are going to need to implement the best practices and standards that we set for the agency. So that's one example there. And an external example, I've been working with our State Historic Preservation Office on a review and compliance project and process that they have, and that's the example where we spoke with over 30 people that are outside of our agency. And so conducting those interviews and then also doing a survey to better get a better outreach about the project and also just more understanding than from the 30 people we spoke with. And now we're using that information from both the surveys, from the staff experience, and also from the customer interviews to address our solutions moving forward.
Great, thank you. That's really interesting. We have one more question. This is from Peter. Geneva, I think this is also for you, but Peter, correct me if I'm wrong. It could be for Andrew. But can you comment a bit on the intersection between lean and human-centered design? What kind of approaches work best for combining the two?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it plays into some of what I mentioned just a little bit ago, but it can be, we do start almost every single one of our projects, I would say, with process mapping. And then it's taking that time after we look at the map to kind of, I think a good example is just this process that I was talking about, the State Historic Preservation Office. We map the process and there's customer interaction when they submit and when they receive, but within a 30-day process, there's no communication back to the customer, and that can create a lot of unknown and uncertainty. And so kind of trying to bring that forward using some of those other kind of visuals that we've created to tie in those questions about what is that customer experiencing during that time? Do they need more than what's currently being offered to them?
Great, thank you. We've got a couple more questions coming in on the chat. Geneva, still for you, from Brianne. When doing the activities of observing or immersing, have you typically involved employees from the department in those activities where they're actually doing the observations or shadowing themselves?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'd say that that's something that we're still working on as to when we do those types of engagements, how do we do them strategically and also in a respectful manner. I gave the example earlier about following a title through that whole process, and we interacted with a lot of staff and we talked with staff throughout the way. I would say personally, I have not done too much observation or immersion for external customers. I would say more of that, it tends to be easier, to be honest, to do that with our internal customers. However, taking time to talk with our external customers has been very, very valuable.
Great, thank you. One more question for you. This is from Craig. He's with the Nevada DOT, and he's asking, have you implemented any changes as a result of your CI work, or are you still in the design phase?
We are actually rolling out our process next week. So we are very close to that implementation phase. And I would say what some of our key findings were, and we did some best practices research with other state agencies as well, trying to assess how are other agencies onboarding new employees. And I would say that the biggest gap that we found was that for hiring managers and supervisors, it's a very overwhelming process because there is so much to do and they want to do it well, but there isn't always clarity about who's responsible for what. So example, a manager versus a human resources individual. And so we were really intentional to think about how can we better document roles and responsibilities, how can we create those clear lines of communication between HR and a new employee, also hiring manager and a new employee. And that's more of what we're going to be rolling out, is that transparency and consistency in that process, along with a couple of new requirements for hiring managers and supervisors to follow when they're onboarding someone within those first 2 weeks of their employment. But Craig, if you're interested in some of what we've developed, feel free to email me and I'd be happy to share with you some of our findings.
Great, thank you, Geneva.
All right, Campbell, do we have any more questions from the chat pane?
No, we do not. Yeah, we've asked all of the questions that have showed up in the chat so far.
Awesome. So does anyone else have any questions to ask? Like I said, go ahead and unmute yourself or go ahead and type it in that chat pane and Campbell can read it off. I'll give a couple more minutes for this. Okay, well, if anyone has any lingering questions or if they think of something later, please feel free to contact the presenters or go ahead and contact us and we can get you in touch with them.
Hey Tess, this is Gary. Could I take just a moment, since we have just a moment, and I'll turn it back to Tess. Folks on the line, I know we're losing folks, but folks on the line, I want to let you know that I'm the most fortunate person on the planet for many reasons. And the big reason is that I have the best team around. And the team today has actually stepped up to a challenge that we don't typically have. We typically produce the Transportation Lane Forum. Most folks that are producing it are in the same room. And because of the Bombogenesis snow event, everybody on the producing team, Tess being the executive producer, but other folks on the producing team are all in different locations. It first of all proves out the the usefulness of having something like a good platform like Zoom teleconferencing, and it also points out what a great team it is. So if you will bear with me, I want to do that little bit of bragging and thanks to the team. Tess, terrific leadership, and everybody else on the team, thank you for persevering through the snow event and producing a wonderful session. In addition to thanking all the presenters, I know that some of you, particularly in the Midwest, have been affected by the snow event too. Thank you for helping us today. Tess, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Gary. We absolutely appreciate that. And that kind of leads into, if you are interested in our next forum, it will be in June. We don't have an exact date set yet, but our great co-producer that helped out today, Mary Nordini, will be producing the next one. So if you are interested in presenting, or you're just interested in being on the distribution list to get a notification for the webinar, go ahead and contact Mary. Her email address is at the bottom. We will also be sending out a survey after the forum, so if you're interested in presenting, you can also express your interest there. And thank you so much for attending today. And thanks again to our presenters. You guys were absolutely wonderful. And then, of course, thank you so much, Gary, and thanks to Mary and Quentin and Campbell that helped out. And, of course, the other interns that were also kind of on backup if I needed anything. I really appreciate it, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.